By 7:15 in the evening, Harbor Meridian Medical Center had already begun to run out of space. 3 ambulances waited under the emergency entrance. 2 trauma bays were occupied. A family argued near triage, believing that shouting would make the line move faster. Managers beat behind blue curtains while nurses crossed the department carrying trays of medication, specimen bags, and expressions that said the shift had been too long before it had even properly begun. Sofía Delgado moved through the noise without adding to it. Her dark hair was braided low at the nape of her neck. Her blue scrubs were neat. Her shoes were practical and her hospital badge was clearly displayed over her chest. Sofía Delgado, RN. The letters were simple. The name was not, at least not to some of the people who read it. Sofía. The patient in Bay 4 frowned at her badge. Sofía, she corrected gently. That's what I said. She smiled as if he had. The man watched her prepare his 4 supplies. Where are you from, Sofía? From across the sea. He waited, expecting more. Sofía secured the tourniquet around his arm. You speak English well. I would hope so. They made me pass several exams in it. The patient laughed. He did not realize she had answered with humor. He leaned back against the pillow. Can I get an American nurse? Sofía's hand stopped for only half a second. Is there a concern about the care I'm providing? No, I just want someone I can understand. Every word she had spoken had been clear. Sofía looked toward the monitor. His pulse was climbing, not from illness, from irritation. She lowered her voice rather than raising it. I will ask another nurse to take over. Before I leave, your foresight needs to be checked because the swelling suggests the catheter may have shifted. He glanced down. For the first time, he noticed the skin near the tape was beginning to rise. Sofía removed the line safely before medication entered the tissue. Then she called Carmen Vélez. The charge nurse arrived wearing confidence like part of her uniform. Carmen was efficient, popular, and comfortable enough in the department to make jokes other people felt required to enjoy. What happened? She asked. He requested another nurse. Carmen looked at the patient, then at Sofía. Accent trouble? The patient laughed. Carmen smiled back. I'll take it from here. Sofía handed over the chart. As she walked away, she heard Carmen say, Don't worry, I speak fluent Nortonian. More laughter followed. Sofía did not turn around. At the central desk, she opened the electronic chart and documented the 4 infiltration, patient request, and handoff. She wrote carefully. Facts protected people better than anger did. At least that was what she had taught herself to believe. A first-year resident named Dr. Benjamin Rivas stood nearby reviewing another patient's blood work. Sofía looked at the screen. His pressure is lower than an hour ago. Benjamin nodded without looking up. Probably the pain medication. His respiratory rate increased. Is anxious. His temperature is also rising. The resident finally faced her. He came in with a urinary infection. We know he has a fever. Sofía looked through the curtain toward the elderly patient. His skin had taken on the gray, damp appearance she had seen too many times before. The pattern may be early sepsis. Benjamin exhaled. We'll repeat the vitals later. His blood pressure is 88 systolic now. That caught the attention of Dr. Juliana Fuentes, the senior emergency physician standing several feet away. What patient? Bay, Sofía answered. Juliana entered the bay immediately. Within minutes, the elderly man was receiving fluids, blood cultures, antibiotics, and continuous monitoring. Benjamin repeated the concern during the team discussion. I think we're looking at early sepsis. Juliana glanced toward Sofía. She thought so first. The resident's face reddened. Sofía did not smile. She was not interested in winning, only in making sure the patient survived. Later, while washing her hands, she noticed 2 nurses behind her imitating the way she pronounced respiratory. One exaggerated the rolled sound in the middle. The other laughed into a paper towel. Sofía turned off the tap. The laughter ended immediately. Carmen entered the staff area carrying a stack of charts. Everyone surviving so far? One nurse replied. Carmen looked at Sofia. You okay? Yes. You're very quiet tonight. I am usually quiet. Carmen smiled. True. Sometimes I can't tell whether you're angry or translating in your head. The other nurses laughed again. Sofia dried her hands. I am usually deciding whether something deserves an answer. Carmen's smile weakened. Before she could respond, an alarm sounded from the main department. Juliana called from B8. Sofia, I need another set of hands. Sofia left without another word. Juliana was adjusting the elderly patient's oxygen when Sofia arrived. You caught it early, the physician said. We caught it early. Juliana gave her a searching look. You don't have to divide the credit every time. I am not dividing it. What are you doing? Keeping the focus on the patient. Juliana nodded slowly. She had begun noticing how often Sofia's observations were repeated by louder people. She had also begun noticing how rarely Sofia corrected them. What's under your sleeve? Juliana asked. Sofia looked down. The cuff of her scrub top had shifted during hand washing, exposing a small edge of dark blue ink near her wrist. She pulled the fabric lower. Nothing important for work. Juliana did not press. Outside, thunder rolled over Norfolk. The storm was moving toward the coast. Nobody in the emergency department knew that before the night ended, a symbol several nurses had mocked would bring an armed medical convoy to a standstill. The break room at Harbor Meridian was too small for 10 people and too cold for anyone to stay long. Sofia sat near the corner with a cup of tea and a container of rice she had not yet opened. Her phone displayed 3 missed calls from Nadia Reyes. Sofia knew why Nadia was calling. The former rescue captain wanted her to speak at a community event honoring volunteers from Darkamar. Sofia had declined twice. She did not want to stand in front of strangers and transform the worst month of her life into an inspirational story. Across the room, Carmen was telling 2 nurses about an upcoming beach weekend. One of them looked toward Sofia. Do you ever go to the beach? Yes. In all those clothes? Sofia looked down at her scrubs. Usually I change first. The nurse laughed. I meant where you're from. Pipolin, from there also change clothes. Carmen smirked. She's funnier than you think. Sofia took a sip of tea. Her sleeve slipped back. The tattoo became visible, a dark blue crescent, 3 narrow waves, a single vertical lantern between them. The nurse beside Carmen leaned closer. What's that? Sofia pulled her wrist back. A tattoo. I can see that. What does it mean? A rescue network. Carmen raised an eyebrow. What kind of rescue network? Civilian? Like an ambulance group? Boats? Clinics? Translators? Whoever could help. One nurse looked at the symbol again. It looks like a gang mark. An Otercid, or some political thing. It is neither. Carmen crossed her arms. You know, Warren is already strict about visible tattoos. It is usually covered. Probably better that way. Sofia looked at her. Why? Patients might misunderstand, like you did. The room grew quieter. Carmen laughed to smooth the moment. Come on, we're joking. Sofia's voice remained calm. The joke is always that I am foreign, dangerous, confused, or less educated. No one answered. Carmen's expression shifted from amusement to defensiveness. You're making it sound worse than it is. I am describing it. A nurse near the refrigerator muttered, everyone was a hero back home. Apparently. Sofia looked directly at her. The room seemed to contract. For one moment, she saw floodwater against broken windows. Fishing boats moving without lights. Children wrapped in rescue blankets. A wounded man bleeding onto the deck while Sofia pressed both hands against his side and counted his breaths. She saw lanterns lifted from rooftops to guide boats through streets that had become rivers. She heard Nadia shouting over the storm, Blue Lantern to the East Channel. Move now. Then the break room returned. Sophia pulled her sleeve down. I never said I was a hero. She placed the unopened food container back into her bag. What did you do? Carmen asked, softer now. Sophia stood. What was needed? She walked out before anyone could ask another question. At the nurse's station, hospital compliance officer Warren Pike waited with a tablet. Warren wore the permanently concerned expression of someone who believed reputation was a medical resource. Nurse Delgado. Yes. I received a question about your tattoo. Sophia looked through the glass toward the staff room. Of course you did. Our appearance policy discourages visible symbols that may be interpreted as political, religious, or gang-related. It is a humanitarian rescue emblem. Can you prove that? She stared at him. Do other nurses have to prove the meaning of their tattoos? That depends on the design. No, it depends on whose skin you see it on. Warren's face tightened. I am trying to prevent misunderstandings. Then explain it correctly. It may be easier if you keep it covered. Sophia held his gaze for several seconds, then pulled the sleeve over her wrist. Easier for whom? Before Warren answered, the emergency entrance erupted with movement. A security officer ran past them. Clear the trauma corridor. Juliana emerged from a patient room. What's coming? The officer pressed a radio to his shoulder. Military casualty. Armed escort. 2 patients. Operación El K9. The department changed instantly. Trauma B7 was opened. A surgical team was called. Security sealed one corridor. Sophia placed her tea on the counter. Juliana looked at her. You're with me. Carmen stepped forward. I can take the bay. Juliana shook her head. Sophia caught 2 things tonight everyone else missed. She stays. Carmen said nothing. Outside, black tactical vehicles turned beneath the emergency canopy. The first stretcher crossed the ambulance threshold at speed. Commander Raúl Calderón lay beneath bloodstained field dressings, one shoulder wrapped tightly while medics maintained pressure near his upper chest. His face had gone pale. His eyes remained open through effort alone. Beside the stretcher ran a large sable German shepherd wearing a black tactical harness. His handler, Tenorio, gripped the lead, but the dog pulled toward Raúl with relentless focus. Behind them came a second injured man under naval escort. It carried a battered relief bag marked with a blue crescent and 3 painted waves. Sophia saw the symbol. Her steps slowed. It resembled Blue Lantern. But something was wrong. The lantern sat above the waves, not between them. No time to think about it. Trauma 7. Juliana ordered. Sophia moved with the team. She cut away fabric near Raúl's shoulder, attached monitoring leads, checked his pupils, and began assessing blood loss. Carmen entered with additional supplies. Pressure is dropping. I see it, Juliana said. Sophia, second line. Sophia prepared the 4. Door paced near the edge of the bay. The naval handler attempted to keep him behind the treatment line. Easy. The dog's attention moved constantly between Raúl and the room. Security officers watched nervously. One whispered, "Why is the dog inside?" Lieutenant Orión Blanco answered without looking away from Raúl. Because the commander is alive. Sophia secured the line. Pressure bag. Carmen handed it over. Raúl's eyes drifted shut. Tor gave one sharp bark. The handler tightened the leash. Sta. Sophia reached across the bed to adjust the tubing. Her sleeve caught on the corner of the cardiac monitor. The fabric pulled upward. The blue lantern tattoo appeared. Tor stopped. His head turned sharply. For half a second, his entire body became still. Then he tore the leash from the handler's hand. The German shepherd sprinted across the trauma bay. Security shouted. A metal tray crashed. Carmen backed into the wall. Get him. Sophia did not run. She barely had time to turn before Thor reached her. The dog stopped inches away. No growl, no attack. It circled once, nose working rapidly, then sat directly beside her, his gaze fixed on her wrist. The trauma bay fell silent except for the monitors. Thor gently touched his nose to the tattoo. Sophia stared down at him. She knew that posture. Years earlier, rescue dogs aboard the Darkamar boats had been trained to stop beside marked medical volunteers during darkness, smoke, and floodwater. But Thor had never met her. It was not recognizing Sophia. It was recognizing what the symbol meant. Raúl opened his eyes. His gaze followed the dog, then landed on Sophia's wrist. Everything changed in his face. Pain remained. Confusion disappeared. He forced his uninjured arm upward. Lieutenant Blanco leaned closer. Commander, don't move. Raúl ignored him. His hand rose to his brow. A salute. The motion was weak, but unmistakable. Blue Lantern, he whispered. Everyone who had marked the tattoo stood frozen. Sophia looked at the wounded commander. You know the symbol? Raúl struggled to keep his eyes open. You carried us through Darkamar. Sophia shook her head. People like me did. You were there. So were many others. The monitor alarm quickened. Juliana stepped in. We continue treatment now. Raúl lowered his hand. Thor remained beside Sophia. The handler approached slowly. Thor. The German shepherd looked toward him but did not move. Sophia touched no part of the dog. She simply lowered her sleeve and said, The commander needs you. Thor stood immediately and returned to Raúl's bedside. Not because she commanded him, because his work had never changed. The handler took the leash again, visibly shaken. Carmen stood near the supply cart, her face colorless. Her eyes moved from Sophia's covered wrist to Raúl. What is Blue Lantern? Sophia checked the flow. Our rescue network. The same answer she had given in the break room. This team, nobody laughed. Across the bay, the second injured man watched silently. Farid Nasser clutched the counterfeit relief bag against his side. He had heard Raúl recognize the symbol. He had also seen Thor run to the nurse, and for the first time since entering Harbor Meridian, fear appeared behind his eyes. Sophia noticed. She also noticed the tattoo on his left wrist, crescent, waves, lantern, almost perfect, almost. But no real Blue Lantern volunteer wore the mark on the left wrist. The original boats had required the right hand to remain visible when approaching checkpoints. The mark had been designed accordingly. Sophia said nothing. Not yet. Juliana stabilized Raúl's shoulder while the trauma team prepared imaging. Lieutenant Blanco stepped beside Sophia. Where did you serve? I did not serve in the military. You were at Darkamar? Yes. With Blue Lantern? Yes. How many evacuations? Sophia looked toward Raúl. He stopped counting after the water reached the second floor. Blanco's expression softened. Being them, Carmen whispered, I didn't know. Sophia did not look at her. You did not ask. The words were quiet. They struck harder than anger. Raúl was transferred toward surgery minutes later. Thor followed beside the bed. Before leaving, the dog looked back once at Sophia. Then his attention returned to the commander. The trauma bay began resetting around them, bloody gauze removed, equipment replaced, charts updated, but nothing had truly returned to normal. The tattoo the staff had treated as an embarrassment had been recognized by a commander and a working dog as the mark of the civilians who had crossed floodwater when official rescue routes failed. Yet Sophia's relief lasted only seconds. Farid Nasser still sat in the adjoining bay wearing a copied symbol. A false mark, wrong wrist, wrong design, wrong rescue bag. When he noticed Sophia watching, he pulled his sleeve down. Sophia opened a new chart and wrote his name carefully. Then beneath it, she added a private clinical note, Blue Lantern identity requires verification. Do not disclose concern yet. She closed the chart. The salute had silenced the people who mocked her. But the counterfeit tattoo had just opened a far more dangerous question. Who was using the Blue Lantern name again? And what had they brought into Harbor Meridian with them? Commander Raúl Calderón regained full consciousness just after sunrise. Soft morning light filtered through the blinds of the intensive observation room while medical equipment hummed quietly around him. His shoulder had been repaired, the bleeding controlled, and the first signs of recovery were beginning to appear. Thor rested beside the bed, had lifted the instant anyone approached the doorway. Dr. Juliana Fuentes reviewed the latest scans before looking toward Sofía. He asked for you. Sofía hesitated. Are you sure? Juliana smiled. He was very specific. Sofía entered quietly. Raúl looked tired, but his eyes were steady. You stayed. I was working. No. He smiled faintly. You stayed after everything. She understood what he meant. After the questions, after the stares, after the salute. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Raúl nodded toward her wrist. Blue lantern. You recognized it immediately. I would recognize it anywhere. Sofía pulled up a chair. Most people think it's just a tattoo. Raúl looked toward the ceiling. 7 years ago, my team was trapped in Darkamar. The bridges had collapsed. The roads were underwater. Ore extraction helicopters couldn't land. He closed his eyes briefly. We thought we were finished. Sofía listened quietly. Then lanterns appeared. Blue lanterns. They were hanging from balconies. Fishing boats began moving through flooded streets. No uniforms, no government, just ordinary people. He looked back at her. Nurses, teachers, mechanics, students, fishermen. They carried strangers through chest-deep water. Sofía smiled sadly. We lost many people. I know. You carried us anyway. She shook her head. We carried everyone. Raúl nodded. Exactly. That's why I saluted. It wasn't you alone. It was everyone who wore that symbol when the official rescue stopped. Outside the room, Carmen happened to hear the conversation through the partially open door. The laughter from the staff room echoed painfully inside her memory. Gang mark, political symbol, everyone was a hero back home. For the first time, she realized how casually cruel those words had been. Later that morning, Raúl asked Lieutenant Orión Blanco to bring an old waterproof notebook from his personal effects. Inside were photographs protected inside clear plastic sleeves. One showed exhausted civilians unloading injured people from fishing boats beneath blue lanterns tied to wooden poles. Another showed improvised medical stations built inside abandoned warehouses. A third showed volunteers handing blankets to soaked children. Sofía stared quietly. I remember this, Doc. Raúl pointed toward a woman barely visible in the corner. Was that you? Sofía smiled softly. No, that's Nadia, the captain. She never stopped smiling. Even when she hadn't slept. Raúl carefully turned another page. Every blanket carried the same small symbol, the crescent, 3 waves, the lantern, exactly the tattoo on Sofía's wrist. No rank, no medals, no uniforms, only a promise that anyone carrying the mark would help whoever reached them first. Juliana quietly stepped into the room. I've practiced emergency medicine for 18 years. Even never seen a commander salute a civilian. Raúl answered without hesitation. I didn't salute a civilian. He saluted courage. While Raúl recovered, the second patient remained under observation 2 floors below. Farid Nasser insisted he had worked with Blue Lantern throughout the evacuation. Several federal officers accepted the explanation immediately. Sofía did not. She stood outside his room reviewing his paperwork. Everything looked almost correct. Almost. Lieutenant Blanco joined her. You think something's wrong? I think someone copied history. She entered the room carrying routine medication. Farid smiled politely. You are from Aramir. Yes, so am I. His pronunciation caught her attention immediately, not because it was foreign, but because it belonged to the wrong region. He spoke Darkamar's harbor district using the mountain dialect. Someone who truly lived there would never mix them naturally. She continued the conversation in her native language. Farid answered smoothly, too smoothly, as though repeating memorized phrases. She glanced toward his wrist. The blue lantern tattoo rested on his left arm. Round. Every authentic volunteer wore it on the right, so it remained visible while guiding rescue boats with lanterns held in the left hand. A tiny detail, one almost nobody else would know. She finished checking his blood pressure. You volunteered since the beginning. Which dock assigned you? Farid answered immediately. East Harbor. Sophia almost sighed. There had never been an East Harbor. Not by that name. The locals called it Lantern Reach. Only outsiders used the government map designation. She thanked him politely and left. Outside, Blanco waited. Well. He isn't Blue Lantern. You're certain? He knows facts, but not life. What does that mean? He learned our history. I never lived it. At that moment, Tor, walking briefly with a veterinary officer through the rehabilitation hallway, stopped beside Farid's travel bag. The dog sniffed once, then stepped backward. Not fearful, not aggressive, simply uncertain. Raúl noticed. What is it? Sophia looked toward the canvas bag. The symbol. It smells wrong. Blanco frowned it. Smells wrong. The blankets, the boats, the rescue ropes, they all carried sea salt, enginol, and waterproof wax. She looked toward the bag. That one smells brand new. Raúl immediately understood. The symbol was printed recently. Exactly. Federal investigators carefully opened the bag. Inside they discovered counterfeit Blue Lantern identification cards, international relief credentials, harbor access permits, medical shipping manifests, a coded notebook listing container numbers arriving through Norfolk Harbor. No ordinary volunteer would have carried such documents. Farid realized the deception had collapsed. His shoulders slumped. I never heard anyone. Raúl looked at him steadily. Then help us stop the people who did. By afternoon, the investigation had expanded beyond the hospital. Federal agents filled a conference room with photographs, shipping records, and enlarged images of the counterfeit credentials. Sofía stood beside a large map of Norfolk Harbor. Raúl Calderón, now assisting the joint investigation, pointed toward several highlighted shipping routes. Every shipment carrying the Blue Lantern symbol passed inspection with almost no delay because inspectors believed they were humanitarian cargo. Sofía nodded sadly. Nobody wanted to question aid. Farid quietly added from the opposite side of the room. That's why they chose the symbol. They knew people respected it. Investigators spread additional evidence across the table, shipping labels, medical supply inventories, temporary refugee documents, port access badges. Everything appeared legitimate until Sofía examined the smallest details. She picked up one relief label. The lantern is too wide. Anote. The waves are reversed. A third. This ink color didn't exist. Blanco looked surprised. You can tell all that? Sofía smiled. The originals were painted by hand. We memorized every line. It helped us identify one another at night. Raúl folded his arms. Which means every fake carries a mistake. Exactly. One by one, she separated authentic historical markings from modern copies. Within an hour, investigators had isolated every suspicious shipment. Hospital Compliance Officer Warren Pike entered unexpectedly. I've reviewed the situation. Everyone looked toward him. I think Nurse Delgado should step away. Raúl frowned. Why? She's personally connected. It could affect objectivity. Sofía remained silent. Raúl answered instead. Her connection is the reason we're finding the truth. Warren persisted. There may be legal concerns. There are, Raúl said calmly. The legal concern is that without her, we'd still believe counterfeit paperwork. The room became quiet. Raúl closed the final evidence folder. Commander is correct. Nurse Delgado isn't the conflict. She's the only reason we recognize there was one. Warren nodded stiffly before leaving. Sofía watched the door close. I've spent years proving I belong. Raúl looked at her. You don't have to prove your past. You already lived it. She smiled faintly. Sometimes living through something isn't enough. It is, Raúl replied. The paperwork simply took longer to catch up. As evening settled over Norfolk Harbor, investigators prepared search warrants for several container terminals. Farid's counterfeit credentials had exposed an operation far larger than anyone expected. Outside the conference room, Thor quietly lay beside Raúl's chair. His work was far from finished, and Sofia knew that somewhere beyond the harbor lights, someone was still using the blue lantern symbol to hide crimes beneath the memory of people who had once risked everything simply to save strangers. The conference room overlooking Norfolk Harbor had become the center of the investigation. Maps covered one wall, shipping schedules covered another. Every available table held photographs, cargo manifests, customs reports, and enlarged copies of the counterfeit blue lantern symbol. Sofia stood silently before a digital projection of her own tattoo. To everyone else, it was a simple design. To her, it was a language. Raúl called her over and zoomed in on the image. We've compared the genuine symbol with every counterfeit version we've recovered. They're similar, but not identical. Sofia nodded. They never could be. Lieutenant Orión Blanco frowned. Why? Because Blue Lantern was never just a logo. She pointed toward the three-wave lines. Most people think these represent water. They do, but they also represent three safe channels through Darkamar Harbor. She pointed to the narrow lantern. The lantern isn't centered. It leans slightly east. That wasn't an artistic choice. It showed rescuers which tide was safest after sunset. Raúl leaned forward. So every tattoo is actually a map. Sofia smiled. A very small one. Raúl immediately overlaid Norfolk Harbor onto the screen. If whoever copied the symbol misunderstood it, they may also have misunderstood the routes. Sofia examined the counterfeit tattoo from Farid's wrist. Her eyes narrowed. The lantern points inland. That would never happen. Why? Because during Blue Lantern, we had one rule. She spoke quietly. A false lantern always points inland. Silence filled the room. Raúl looked at the harbor map. What if that's not just a saying? Sofia traced an invisible line across the projection. If someone copied the symbol literally, they're directing shipments away from active relief docks. Raúl followed her finger toward abandoned terminals. Captain Blanco checked recent shipping records. There are 3. Sofia shook her head. Only one. De Taïf. Everyone looked at her. One terminal still has enough depth for fully loaded cargo after midnight. Raúl highlighted Pier 31. No inspections had occurred there in months. That's our location. The operation began shortly after midnight. Federal agents, port police, naval investigators, emergency medical teams. Sofia remained inside the mobile command center overlooking the docks. She had volunteered to accompany the field team. Raúl refused. You save lives. They secure the scene. Both jobs matter. She accepted his reasoning. Thor stepped from the vehicle beside Raúl. The German Shepherd wore reflective tactical equipment as handlers released him toward rows of stacked shipping containers. The harbor echoed with cranes and distant foghorns. Container after container passed beneath Thor's nose. Nothing. Then he stopped. One sharp bark. His handler released additional slack. The dog moved to a faded white container carrying the familiar blue lantern symbol. At first glance, it appeared genuine. Sofia watched through live drone footage. It's wrong. What? The lantern? The paint is too bright. Federal agents surrounded the container. The seal appeared authentic. Bolt cutters snapped through hardened steel. The door swung open. Silence. Inside were dozens of frightened people, men, women, children, not criminals, refugees. Several required immediate medical attention. Others clutched faded identification papers that had been altered to resemble humanitarian evacuation documents. Behind them sat unopened trauma kits, intravenous fluids, antibiotics, surgical equipment, and thousands of dollars worth of stolen emergency medical supplies. Raúl immediately radioed the command center. "We need every available medic." Sofía was already moving. She entered the container minutes later carrying triage supplies. The frightened passengers hesitated when uniformed officers approached. Sofía spoke softly in Aramir. Fear dissolved into tears. One elderly woman reached for her hands. "We thought nobody knew we were here." "You are safe now," Sofía answered. Children began emerging one by one. Juliana coordinated treatment outside. Raúl secured the perimeter. Tor calmly moved among the rescue teams, no longer searching for danger, but ensuring frightened survivors could pass safely toward medical care. One little boy stared at Sofía's wrist. "The lantern," he whispered. "My grandmother told me that symbol meant boats." Sofía smiled. "It once meant people came back for you. It still does." The evidence recovered from Pier 31 transformed the investigation. Financial records linked every shipment to Elliott Vance's International Logistics Company. The humanitarian organization listed on customs paperwork existed only on paper. Blue Lantern had become camouflage. Weeks later, the federal hearing began. The courtroom overflowed with reporters, veterans, refugee advocates, medical professionals, and survivors from Darkamar. Elliott Vance sat quietly beside his attorneys, confident until Sofía testified. She carried no dramatic presentation. Only one weathered rescue blanket preserved by Nadia Reyes. The faded Blue Lantern emblem remained stitched into one corner. Sofía placed it gently before the panel. "This is real." She then held up a counterfeit relief vest seized from the shipping container. "This is not." Raúl projected both symbols side by side. Every tiny difference became obvious. Wave spacing, lantern angle, thread color, plasmint. The panel listened carefully as Sofía explained why none of those details had been accidental. They helped frightened people know whom they could trust. Farid testified next. He admitted transporting counterfeit credentials. He identified Elliott Vance as the organizer. Then Nadia Reyes entered. The courtroom grew silent. She described fishing boats carrying wounded civilians while shells landed across flooded neighborhoods. She remembered Raúl's team. She remembered Sofía treating children through the night. Finally, Raúl stood. "I saluted Nurse Delgado because people often think courage belongs only to uniforms. It doesn't. My team survived because civilians refused to leave strangers behind." The courtroom remained quiet long after he finished speaking. Elliott Vance lowered his head for the first time. Federal prosecutors presented shipping records, financial transfers, witness testimony, recovered cargo, and falsified humanitarian documents. The verdict followed days later. Convictions were entered on multiple federal charges, including human trafficking, fraud, conspiracy, and theft of humanitarian aid. Nearly a year later, Harbor Meridian Medical Center opened the International Trauma and Refugee Health Clinic. Unlike the emergency department, the building felt peaceful. Children played in a small courtyard. Interpreters greeted families in several languages. Former refugees now worked beside physicians, therapists, and nurses. Sofía had been appointed clinical coordinator, not because of the investigation,